In this recording, we're going to talk about the circular flow of income. Why it is important? I mean, it is it establishes sort of a link between the firm side, which is going to be producing goods and services, and the household side, which will be buying goods and services produced by the firms and will also be supplying the factors of production. For example, their own labor. So let me just write that. So it is sort of establishes a link between producers and consumers, right? So producers are going to buy the services of the households. So households have all the labor with them. So households will be supplying labor to the producers. And producers in turn, when they have used these services, will be providing these households with the income. Naturally, firms will also be producing goods. So with the income which firms have provided, these households will be buying the products produced by the firm. So this is like the circular flow. So there is a flow of income which is going from firm to the households, and there is the flow of expenditure which is going from households to the firm, right? Also, there is the flow of services from households to the firm in the form of the labor services, and there is the flow of goods in the form of whatever, for example, bread, clothes, whatever, from firms to the households. So this is sort of the circular flow. So initially we're going to talk about just a two-sector model in which there is a firm and there are households, right? So let us just look at that. So an economy, so there's an assumption. An economy produces a single good let us say bread. Let us say bread. And this is using just a single input. Let us say labor, right? So let us just draw a very simple chart for this. So there is a household on one side, and there are firms on the other side, right? Households on the one side and firms on the other side. So what is happening is that the households, they are providing labor services to the firms, right? So households are providing their services to the firm. So let me just write that. So they are providing labor to the firm. And firms in return of the labor services which households are providing, they are providing them with income. Firms are providing income to the households, right? Also income to the households, or initially we just want to write bread or goods to the households. So we should not be, because you can think of in two ways. So the inner loop is telling you the flow of goods, right? And I'll also make one other loop which will be the flow of the income and expenditure. So let's take this as just the product loop, and we can also name this as, let's say, this inner loop as the flow of bread and labor. This is the flow of bread and labor. So you have the households which are supplying labor to the firms, and the firms are supplying product to the firm, right? Product to the households. Then there is another outer loop. What is that? Outer loop is these firms. Can I also make one? Just I'm sorry. So there's a household here, there are firms here, like something like this. Okay. Then these firms, they are also going to supply sort of, let's say, right. So firms, they are going to supply income to the households, right? So firms, they are going to supply income to the households. So in return for the labor which households have given to the firms, firms are going to supply income to the households. And households in return will be buying goods and services from the firms, and for that they're going to make the expenditure, right? And on that they're going to make the expenditure. So households are going to make expenditure on these goods and services. So, and this outer loop is the corresponding flow of dollars. So outer loop is corresponding flow of dollars, corresponding flow of dollars. That's one thing, right? So, you know what I mean? Firms, they are paying income to the households in the form of wages, right? And they can also keep some amount as profits as the owners, right? So firms, of course, would be owned by someone, so that entrepreneur is going to keep the profits, and but that entrepreneur is also the part of the households. So basically, that's like an income to the households only. So that is one thing, right? So what you can do is, if you look at it carefully, then what you will find basically is that you can compute either the total income in the economy, or you can compute the total expenditure in the economy. That is going to be more or less the same. So that's going to be the same. So they must be the same. Why? Because if I am the producer and you are the buyer, right? So, and I have used your services, I have given you income, you have spent on my goods. So in macro, somebody's income is going to be somebody's expenditure, and somebody's expenditure is going to be somebody's income. So both of the things are more or less the same thing. So both of them are going to give you the same answer. How do you go? How do you think of? You can write this GDP. I'll tell what GDP is. GDP is your gross domestic product. But I do not want to just you can just think of like this. So it is sort of a measure of the entire economic activity which is being carried out in a country for a given period of time, or in a given period of time. So that's like one measure, because in the economy, apples are going to be produced, oranges are going to be produced, clothes are going to be produced, some services are given. So how do you measure those different things which are measured in different units only in one unit? So you take the money value of them, so, and you add them up. That's what GDP is. So GDP is the sum of is the sum of total income from the production of goods and services. So you can think, in this case, goods is basically your bread. Or you can also think GDP, think of GDP in terms of expenditure. You can also think of GDP in terms of expenditure also. So GDP is also the total purchases on goods and services. In this case, basically your bread, right? So these two ways of computing GDP, that is this total purchases of goods and services, total purchases on goods and services. So these two ways of computing GDP is same. So somebody's income is somebody's expenditure. That's one thing. So you can either compute total income in the economy, that will also give you GDP, and you can also compute total expenditure in the economy, that will also give you GDP, right? So let us just define what GDP is. We will also going to now what exactly we are going to do. We are going to look at GDP, this circular flow of income in the three sector diagram. So there is one more form, one more element. It's going to come here, which is government, right? And we're going to complicate this diagram just a little bit. But let us just define what GDP is. Please write that. GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a given period of time. That is also what GDP is. So now let us look at the another version of the circular flow of income, in which there is government also, apart from firms and the house. Now we're going to look at the circular flow of income where there are three economic actors: government, households, and firms, right? So let us just look at that. Circular flow of dollars through the economy. Right. So now there are three economic actors, and there are three kinds of markets. So one is the market for factor services or factors of production. So what are the factors of production? Land, labor, capital, enterprise. And the market for goods and services. You produce bread, you produce cheese, you produce guns, you produce whatever. There are different kinds of goods and services. And then there are financial markets. So what are how the income is going to flow in this scenario? Let's look at that. So let us just write our three economic actors first. So you have the households here, right? You have the government here, and you guys have the firms here, right? So these are three economic actors which we have. Let me just mark them, right? Okay, now how does this go? And there are three kinds of markets also. Let me just write that: market for factors of production. And then you also have financial markets. And you also have market for goods and services, right? So these are the different markets which you have. Okay. So what do? What happens is that these firms, they are going to pay, of course, they're going to demand these factor services, and they will be paying factor payments in return. So I've told you about the factor payments already. So for example, you are household and I'm firm, you have given me labor services. So those labor services are the factors of production, and I'll be paying you factor payment in terms of wages, right? I am also although I'm a firm, but I'm the owner of the firm, so I am also the part of the household, and I will also be getting the profits. So that profits is also a sort of the factor payment. Okay, so this factor payment which firms are making to the factors of production, that is going as the income to the household, right? That is going as the income to the households. Now the households, they will be spending on purchasing these goods and services. So they will be spending on consumption. Whatever income they have got, they will be spending on consumption. They will also be paying taxes to the government. So tax becomes like the income to the government. And households will also be putting some amount of the extra income which they have, which they have not spent on consumption, neither they have given as the taxes, they will be putting that as private savings. They'll be putting that as private savings. Now about the government. Government will be government will be getting taxes from the households, and will be making some purchases for the goods and services. So those are government purchases. Right? And whatever is left out, for example, government taxes are more than the government expenditures. Government purchases are nothing but government expenditure. So whatever is more, right? So that will be like going to financial markets in the form of public savings. Right? It will be going to the financial markets in the form of the public savings. When the households, they have spent on the market for the goods and services, so that consumption, that expenditure on consumption, it acts as a firm revenue. So that is an income for the firm, which again they will be utilizing for the further production. They will be doing that. Also, one more thing which will happen is that the households and the firms both, they will be investing, they will be borrowing, right, from the financial markets. So that will also go like this as an investment. So I'm sorry for the very curved line here. So this is an investment, right? That's an investment. So these guys will also be, households will be borrowing, for example, to buy residential. They will be investing in terms of the residential investment. and the government, and the firms will be investing in order to buy factories, let's say. So all of this will be the investment part, right? So it's a very rudimentary way of telling what exactly is the circular flow of income through the economy when there are three sectors in the economy. You also have to understand one thing, that whatever is left out, right, your public savings are the excess of the government revenue over the government expenditure. So and what is the income of the government? Taxes. So if taxes are more than the government expenditure, that means it is a budget surplus case. If taxes are less than the government expenditure, that is the budget deficit case. Okay, so in this recording, what is it that you have learned? You've learned that how do you depict it in a very rudimentary fashion, the two sector circular flow and the three sector circular flow. Okay, thank you very much.